Max did not give up. He doesn't know what it's like to give up. He served his nation with as much distinction off the battlefields of Vietnam as he did while he was at Quai Son. Administrator of Veterans Affairs, Secretary of State of the state of Georgia, United States Senator from this state, head of the American Battle Monuments Commission from 2009 until now. But I always think about him as captain and winner of the Silver Star and the Bronze Star, United States Army. A native of this town with degrees from Stetson and from Emory. Ladies and gentlemen, my personal hero, Max Cleland.
Well, I'm Max Cleland, and I approve that announcement. To get this meeting started off right, let's talk about suicide. I have a friend of mine, Tom, who was a swift boat commander with John Kerry. And he called me up, this is a true story, he called me up about 6 months ago, and he said, what's with all this suicide stuff in the Army? You know, and I said, well, you know, we have multiple deployments. These kids have really, you know, bitten the bullet. They've gone to Iraq or Afghanistan 4, 5, 6 times. And I said, you know, you got to give them a little break. And he said, I just wanted to know how you felt about it. And he said, because if anybody has a reason to commit suicide, it's you. And I thought, well, thank you very much. So I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad Tom's here. Tom, as you all know, was called in to put CNN on the map. He not only put CNN on the map in the United States, but he has put it on the map around the world. It is the acknowledged news leader of our planet. And I appreciate him coming. I appreciate the Atlanta Press Club. I thank Bill Crane for turning us out tonight, and I appreciate that very much. And Ms. Elaine Hudson for all your work. And I see some people that I haven't seen in a while. Now, Harold Kitchens is here, and I think the last time I saw him was like, I don't know, 1959, 1960, when he was receiving the Bausch and Lomb Science Award in Lithonia High School.
You were not as good an athlete then as you have presented yourself to be later.
Bullshit. Anyway, one thing about age, you know, you just get better with all the stories that you tell. And Wilson, it's good to see you with your chopsticks, and your brother David. We're glad to see all of you. And my administrative assistant from my Senate days, and the man I counted on when I was Secretary of State, Wayne Howell, and his lovely wife, Wayne and Nell. Nell, thank you very much for being here. And Elsie, who was there in the office, and Linda Beasley, who has attended probably every governor since we don't know when. So we're glad to have all of you. Let me just say, and Quinn Hudson, my friend, and others, let me just say that in trying to put the news events of the last couple of 3 weeks, into perspective, I've had a close-up view, and I've had kind of the sitting at home watching television view, and now I'm going to introduce to you a man who's got another perspective on all of this. First of all, I have a close-up view. I run the American Battle Monuments Commission. Most people don't know what the American Battle Monuments Commission does because we do all of our work overseas. We run 24 American cemeteries 25 monuments in 14 different nations. We're the overseas cemetery people. For those of you who have ever visited one of our cemeteries, like Normandy or others, we're the people who do that. And we have been around since 1923, since the end of the First World War. So I'm the secretary of the commission. I'm the CEO. President Obama gave me that honor June 3rd of 2009. It's interesting, too, that within 72 hours of that appointment, I was greeting him at Normandy, and all the work had already been done, Quinn. I mean, you know, the staff had already done it. And there I'm greeting Prince Charles, and instead of saying Your Royal Highness, I said, you know, Your Grace. I mean, Your Royal Highness. I mean, so I blew my first big welcome to a dignitary at Normandy, and we had a bunch of others. But then after the ceremony, President Obama came up to me and said, "Good job." Yeah, I've been on duty at 72 hours. So since then, it's painfully obvious that this great agency, which was created after World War I to give a sense of meaning and purpose to the terrible sacrifice of Americans in that war, by creating cemeteries abroad, most in those days in France and Belgium. But now, with the end of World War II, we're in 24 different cemeteries in 14 different countries. So recently, because of the North African campaign in World War II, we have a cemetery in Tunisia. Who would have ever thought that Tunisia would explode? And I never dreamed that being head of a cemetery operation, that I would ever have to call upon some military expertise, Tom, and ultimately extract in the dark of night, a la the movie Casablanca with letters of transit and all this kind of stuff, the superintendent and his family from Tunisia even before anybody else got out, because there were tanks out in front of our cemetery, there was machine gun fire. When the family got to Paris, when we finally flew them out on an Air France flight from Tunisia to Paris, the children heard a jackhammer out in the street and said, "Daddy, the machine guns are still fighting." So, still firing. So we had to extract our team from Tunisia, and we don't have a cemetery in Egypt, we don't have a cemetery in Yemen, and we don't have a cemetery in Jordan. But we have a cemetery in Tunisia. It's en route to the presidential palace. So we found ourselves dealing with actual gunfire and tanks and a revolution. I don't know how it really got started in Tunisia. I am told that a young man who couldn't find work burned himself, and that became kind of a cause célèbre. But stay tuned. It may be that the real story behind all this was that the man who was the strong man, the dictator, the man who ran the bank, namely the country's bank, and of course, en route as he fled, he went by the bank and got all the gold and left. But he let Facebook into the country because his 16-year-old daughter wanted Facebook. If you follow the, shall we say, revolutionary fervor through North Africa, from Tunisia over to Egypt, who knew that 5 million Facebook subscribers in Egypt would be a catalyst or a catalytic agent for an incredible revolution in that country? Who would have believed that Al Jazeera, the internet, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, these new forms of communication, to include radio, television, and the internet and all access to it, would be the combustible agent not only in Tunisia, but in Egypt in Yemen, and so far in Jordan. Who would have thought that these agencies of communication would force the king out of his palace in Jordan out to see real people? It wasn't American intervention militarily that did that. It was basically communication, new tools of communication, and courageous journalists reporting on the activities of courageous citizens who had had enough. Wow. Now that story, as they say, is still unfolding. What I wanted to put into perspective here was that the incredible service and sacrifice of American veterans around the globe, 125,000 of which are buried overseas, some of which are buried in Tunisia, give us a sense of history about that place, those places in which they find themselves, no question. And that the events unfolding today give us just a sense of awe that this is all happening. But where are we going down the road in these places? Is there a country that had the heavy hand of dictatorship on it for 45 years, and then with the collapse of that regime, freedom happened, communication happened, people talking and meeting with one another happened, a free press happened? What happened to that country after the heavy hand of dictatorship was on it and all of a sudden freedom happened?